Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalia Kuraeva. I am a senior instructional designer at University Online Education Services at Rutgers University. On behalf of 2025 Rutgers University Online Learning Conference, I welcome Rebecca Brody. She is a professor, Department of Clinical and Preventive Nutrition Sciences, School of Health Professionals at Rutgers University, and Jason Stevens, who is Associate Professor of Nutrition, Austin Community College, Adjunct Assistant Professor, Department of Clinical and Preventive Nutrition Sciences, School of Health Professions at Rutgers University. We are pleased to have them to share their thoughts on the generative AI in the healthcare education. During the presentation, please engage using the live chat session. You may pose any questions you have using Q&A, and the presenters will answer them at the end of the presentation as time permits. Please review the chat from the beginning for links to resources related to these presentations. There's a slides and there's a link to YouTube, so please just scroll up and you will see that. Okay, Rebecca and Jason, welcome. It's all yours now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so honored to be here today to present to you the Leadership Lab and AI-powered healthcare simulation. We're going to be talking today about a class that in spring of 2024, Jason and I were asked to teach in the Department of Clinical and Preventive Nutrition Sciences in the School of Health Professions at Rutgers University. And this course had been previously taught. However, we really decided to reimagine how we could teach this course and give it a real fresh eyes approach. And so with that, we decided to conceptualize a hospital simulation as the backdrop for our course. So we embarked on a semester-long journey of embedding generative AI activities and assignments into our course to try to really make it engaging and enhance the learning for our students. We really could not have pulled off some of the things that we did without the help of generative AI. And we're teaching this course now for the second time this spring and adding some bells and whistles. So today we're going to be sharing some of the things that we're doing in our course with you. Next slide. So our objectives are to understand the role of generative AI in teaching in healthcare education, and we talk about it in terms of healthcare education, but the applications can be really in any type of teaching. We're going to explore Prairietown Regional Medical Center, or PRMC for short, a hospital simulation driven by generative AI, evaluate the impact of these AI enhancements on student learning and engagement, and discuss some challenges and opportunities that we've identified as part of generative AI in healthcare education. Next slide. So just a brief background of the use of AI in healthcare education. It really helps you to focus on learning by doing or experiential learning. It engages students in active problem solving and critical thinking with lower stakes, but with real world context. So it allows students to apply their theoretical knowledge that they're learning in environments that are simulated. So there's really low risk. They can feel like they can take chances, they can practice, and they're not going to be faced with what it might be like the first time they're in a clinical setting and feeling like they're going to make mistakes. They can practice those things before they go. So that also leads to enhancement of self-efficacy. It helps students by giving them immediate feedback, monitoring their progress, and reflecting on learning by making them more autonomous learners. So again, that repetitive practice of things can occur, and it also facilitates peer-to-peer interactions in simulated environments by enhancing their collective problem-solving skills, and particularly in healthcare education, that interprofessional lens of learning. And generative AI also can be seen as a complementary tool. We consider it a supplement, not a replacement for what we do. We are experienced educators, we're empathetic healthcare professionals. That does not go away with the use of AI. It's a co-partner for us, or a creative partner, and we use it to really help enhance the educational experience for our students, not to replace us. It supports universal design for learning by providing diverse and customizable learning experiences that accommodate various learning styles. And it also, one that I really like, is helps with cognitive offloading. So some of the tasks that are more mundane tasks, for example, for me, building rubrics, it's just something that takes a lot of time and it's very repetitive. We can use AI to help offload some of those tasks so we can focus on higher order teaching tasks. Next slide. So when we were given this course to teach, we really kind of thought about it as a challenge. We knew that our audience were graduate nutrition students, and the course was NUTR 6400, Leadership and Change. These graduate nutrition students were almost all registered dietitians. So they were post-professional students doing their graduate degree, either their master's or doctorate degree at Rutgers, after they've already become a professional. So the challenge was the fact that they all have different learning and work experiences before they even came into our course. Some of them may have been early career registered dietitians, whereas others may have been in the field for 20 years with various levels of professional experience, leadership opportunities, and that led to us trying to decide how we could level the playing field so that these students all received a learning environment where they could all grow and extend their learning, but not to disadvantage the students that had less experience. Because in the past, these courses required you to really draw on many of your past or present experiences. So the hospital simulation allowed us to build this environment where students could work within it, and the newer students that were early in their career could really grow, where those students that have been in the profession for a while and may have been leaders could then have that structure to also extend their learning. So it really allowed us to give an opportunity across the different student levels. And we able to really be creative and engage students in lots of different activities where we couldn't have done it. Next slide. So let's just touch on the ICAP framework. So when we went into this course, we decided to frame it using this cognitive engagement level framework. So the ICAP framework has 4 different levels of cognitive engagement: passive, active, constructive, and interactive. And passive and active levels are really the laying down of knowledge. So the transfer of knowledge, getting them that theoretical background that they needed in order to be successful in understanding leadership and change concepts. However, we did not want to spend the majority of our time just relaying information to them. We wanted to move up in the ranks here of these levels to be more at the constructive and interactive levels. And that's where students really generate new knowledge. They take that theoretical background and they grow it they develop their own types of experiences through the knowledge that we have laid down. So they're generating new information, they're co-creating with their classmates, and they're growing and generating and synthesizing information. So that's where we hoped, as we embarked on the course, that we could spend more of our time. Next slide, please. So with that, I introduce you to our Leadership Lab. The Leadership Lab is our term for kind of the collective activities and things that work within our AI-generated hospital simulation called Prairietown Regional Medical Center, or we'll refer to as PRMC. And this is a 15-week, 3-credit course for our graduate nutrition students, and it provides a framework for many of the activities that we take place throughout this semester. So we teach concepts such as strategic planning and human resources and quality improvement, patient safety, human resources, all things that you could just lay down content and have students learn from, but we do it in the context of a hospital simulation. So it allows the students to really apply new knowledge and have a simulation that is not static. It's very dynamic. The students interact with it on a week-to-week basis, and depending on how they interact with it, we adjust the simulation so that it meets the needs of the new storyline that has developed. And while that might seem like a lot of work for faculty, with the help of ChatGPT and other resources, it really has become a fun, exciting, and manageable way to teach and really engaging for our students. So I'm going to turn this over to Jason now, who's going to kind of pull up the hood and tell you a little bit about what we are doing in the course.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Becky. That was a fantastic introduction, and I think you laid the groundwork for the why of why we created this sort of simulation activity. What I wanted to do was provide you a little bit of the backstory on how this was conceptualized and an analogy to help you think of what we're doing here. So I actually was inspired by a video game. So spoiler alert, I am a nerd. I was playing this fantastic, engaging game called Baldur's Gate 3. And if you know that reference, congratulations, you are also a nerd. And the wonderful thing about this game is simulating Dungeons and Dragons. And if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons at all, you have a dungeon master and a set of players who exist in a fantasy world. And the decisions that these players are making all influence the shape that the story is taking, but the dungeon master is guiding the story, has created the world, has created the characters that inhabit this world, and that's what Becky and I were doing in this simulation, and we used AI to really help us generate the color and the texture of this world, which became Prairie Town and Prairie Town Regional Medical Center. So when I had this idea, when I was playing this game, one of the things that I found so engaging about it was the game seemed to anticipate any decision I could possibly make. Any wild idea that I threw at this game, it seemed to respond and the world would change based on my decisions. So I thought, how can we take this experience and give that to students and put it in a learning situation? Because I realized I was using so many of my critical thinking skills to get through this game. So I conceptualized this idea of a fictional hospital system, and we wanted to create a fictional hospital system that had a lot of problems. So as we began thinking about this, we realized we're going to have to build the whole world that this hospital system inhabits. And thus, we came up with Prairie Town, Oklahoma. Why Oklahoma? I actually was born and raised in central Oklahoma. So that allowed me to sort of draw from my personal experience and create a place that's rich in demographics. And then we created Prairie Town Regional Medical Center as this fictional hospital system that was rich in problems for our students to solve, as well as leaders for our students to interact with. The way that we used AI with this simulation, again, was to create the text, the voices, the pictures, and to help us keep track of this simulation so that we could be responsive to students. For example, if they asked for a policy document that exists in this fictional hospital system, AI could generate that for us. So what I'd like to show you first, and then I'm going to take you deeper under the hood later, so I'd like to show you a little introduction video that the students were provided when they first set out on this journey. And our students acted as consultants to this hospital system. And this is a little bit of content that they get at the beginning of the course to introduce them to the world that they're now inhabiting. All right, so hopefully that gave you a sense for the world that we built, that our students are going to now inhabit. And let me tell you a little bit about the characters that inhabit this place. And so we created a cast of leaders for Prairie Town Regional Medical Center that our students would be interacting with. So primarily, Dr. Emily Johnson is sort of our key figure at PRMC. She's a new CEO who has stepped into this hospital system that's experiencing so many challenges, from long wait times, patient dissatisfaction, employee dissatisfaction, nearby competitors. So the ship needs to be righted, and she has hired on our students as consultants to her and the leaders at PRMC to turn this ship around. So students are placed directly within this environment and told, you're now going to be interacting with all of these leaders to solve big problems in this hospital system. So we created this cast of characters to have all different leadership styles and personality styles, that the students would get exposed to the different ways that they're going to be interacting in the real world with people with differences, right? You've all had difficult bosses or easier bosses, more transformational leaders, more participative leaders, more autocratic leaders. And so this is the cast of characters that we develop for students to interact with. And then our students were actually placed in teams. They had to create their own company name and company logo and take on their own identity as consultants to PRMC. So I have another little video to introduce you to our leadership team so you can also get a sense of how we created these characters, what they look and sound like, and what their personalities are like. So as you can see, we built a diverse cast of characters for our students to interact with. They all have unique backgrounds. And one thing I want to say about our leaders is they felt very real to us. So as we developed them, we injected them with people from our own lives. So Nellie Vasquez was sort of a negative Nellie character that we all kind of know, the person who sort of like Cassandra, she's doomed to always be right but not be believed. And so she's always right, but everyone kind of thinks of her as being negative, for example. We have Kevin Bruce, who's sort of a dysfunctional manager. He's very hands-off. He's going to create a lot of problems for our student consultants. And so you can see these characters are all going to pose their own sets of challenges and opportunities for our student consultants as they go through this experience. Now, I want to share a little bit about what's actually happening under the hood. So if you're wondering, how did we create all of this? What's AI actually doing behind the scenes? So I want you to think of Becky and I as sort of the puppet masters. We're sort of the dungeon master running this simulation, and we're using ChatGPT 11 Labs, which does the voices, and we're using DALL-E 3 to create the artwork and to run our simulation, to keep track of all the details and to generate things as we need them. So one of the ways that I achieved this was by building a custom GPT. Now, because we don't have enough time to get into the nitty gritty of this, you can think of a custom GPT as an instance of ChatGPT that's preloaded with its own prompt and information, meaning I have pre-trained this instance of ChatGPT on my own set of data that I want it to pull from. So all that world building that Becky and I did of creating PRMC, Prairie Town, all of its inhabitants, its demographics, all of that information is already loaded in here, including a document that has bios of all of our characters, their personalities, their leadership styles. So anytime we interface with this instance of ChatGPT, it knows our whole world and our characters, and it can help us quickly generate responses in the voices of those characters. So that's what a custom GPT is helping us to do. You could do this with regular ChatGPT, but you would have to load all that information in and keep a single running chat. There are limitations with that too, we can talk a little bit about later. But I wanted to walk you through sort of what's actually happening. So when we talk about this simulation, what are we actually doing with the students? So first of all, the students are interfacing with our course through Canvas. So Canvas is our learning management system. And oftentimes they're interacting with our PRMC cast of characters through discussion boards that are posted on Canvas. So as an example, we have a discussion board set up on leadership styles. So again, we're trying to keep all of this in character. So when students go into this discussion board, they actually see the first prompt for this discussion from Dr. Emily Johnson. So we've used ChatGPT to create a narrative of the discussion activity that we want. So for example, I'll ask the custom GPT to draft a letter or a narrative in the voice of Dr. Emily Johnson, asking the students to review all of the PRMC leadership teams and characterize their leadership style. And that's a discussion activity. So then I post that to the discussion board, and it looks just like a post from Dr. Emily Johnson, either a letter, or in our case, we actually did a voiceover response. So they have her face and her voice asking for what she wants. And then the students are going to respond on this discussion board directly to Dr. Johnson as if they are giving her advice. So for example, the students are going to reply and characterize the different leadership styles of the PRMC leaders. And I also noted there too that once we get a response from ChatGPT, we're always revising those responses. So Becky and I are not just taking whatever ChatGPT gives us and going, I'm going to post that right onto Canvas. We both use our expertise and our deep knowledge of our profession in order to revise anything and fact check anything we get from ChatGPT. So we both edit with ChatGPT. For example, I can ask it, hey, I don't like that response. Can you change it in this way? And then once we get something we like, we can edit it even further. Maybe make it sound more natural, do a little bit of fine tuning. Then we post that to the discussion board for our students to review. And then the students are going to respond in character as these consultant groups to our leaders. Now, once we get a response from the students, we actually take those responses back to that custom GPT. And I put all of those responses in with any identifying information removed. So none of the students' names go in there. And I'll say, hey, this is a response that I got from our student consultant teams. Now draft a reply from Dr. Johnson to their response. And often we'll ask for maybe a critical, give me pros and cons, make sure that you include positives and negatives. And then it'll give us another response, which will again edit as needed and then post back to the discussion board for students to review. So this is the sort of back and forth that the students have. They're engaging with the PRMC leaders. We're using our AI tools to bring those responses to life, and then students are replying to them. Or they may be engaging with each other. So occasionally the students will actually be, maybe as a second step, they'll be engaging with each other within that discussion board. And then finally, at the end of the discussion, we'll often ask ChatGPT to summarize the whole thing. So create a final summary from our PRMC leader, summarizing the entire discussion, providing pointers. And a big key thing here is we always try to have our discussions end with an action item. What are the consultants recommending that we do? What are we creating? What are we changing? And then we take that back to ChatGPT and say, hey, here's the ideas that our students had. Perhaps it's rewriting the company's mission, vision, and values. Maybe it's firing somebody. Maybe it's creating a new initiative at the hospital. And then ChatGPT is helping us imagine what that change might lead to and how our leaders would respond to it. So there's always an action item that changes the future of this discussion. So really quickly, a couple of the other tools that we used, one of them was 11 Labs that I mentioned. So when you heard all of those characters speaking, this is a software tool that we use to achieve that. So 11 Labs creates realistic sounding AI voices using either text to speech or a really cool feature called the voice changer. So if you notice that all those characters sound like real people, one of the ways we achieve that is I voiced many of those characters. And what AI did was it takes the text of my speech plus my cadence, my pauses, my breaths, my emotions, and it transforms that into the other characters' voices. So they sound real and dynamic and natural. Now, again, that's a little more time consuming. And I will say I did that often because it was so much fun. I had a blast creating these characters, voicing these characters. I got really into it. I will say it's probably the most fun I have had teaching in now 11 years of teaching. But you could just use text to speech and it sounds pretty natural. Sometimes they sound a little flat, but oftentimes they also sound pretty realistic. So that's one of the tools we use to bring things to life. Now, this semester, we created a really cool new feature in our course. We were thinking about, what if students, because we used to just have these static discussion boards or tasks for students to do in this simulation. We began wondering, what if students have questions? What if students want to dig a little bit deeper? What if they want to get a document, for example, or get data? We created something called the water cooler, which is a place where students can go to get more information. So the water cooler served as a place where students can go and ask questions of particular stakeholders, which led to critical thinking. It was a really cool thing to see. So students could actually engage in the water cooler with our stakeholders directly. So for example, they could ask Dr. Johnson, what are the core values of the hospital? They might ask Nellie, hey, tell me about some data about enteral nutrition orders or delivering. For example, they had an initiative on tube feeding. They were able to go in and talk to our stakeholders directly, and then we would generate those responses on the fly in the setting of the water cooler, which is this cafe adjacent to the hospital where our leaders like to hang out and talk about things. And so we would actually place the responses in that setting. So we'll show you an example of what that looks like. So here's the answer to the question that the student asked Dr. Johnson about the core values of the hospital. So hopefully you could see with that reply, and I saw that there was a question about generating on the fly. So to clarify, the student would pose that question within our discussion board to the stakeholder. I would take that to ChatGPT, meaning to Gen AI, and say, here's the student's question. Help me generate a response. And then I myself would edit that response and then voice it and post it to the discussion board. So it's a little bit of both. It's both generative AI and us. Generative AI is working as our creative partner here to help us generate these responses. And the water cooler was a really it ended up being used so much more than we expected. We just created it as a let's see what happens kind of a thing. And what we found was students loved this opportunity to dive in deep with our PRMC leaders, ask critical questions. And we could see as their instructors, their critical thinking sort of unfolding with the questions that they were asking. And sometimes they challenged us with the questions that they were asking. But generative AI was always there to help us fill in the blanks, get the ball rolling, and then we could sort of pick it up from there. And then lastly, I also wanted to show you DALL-E 3. This is where we generated the art. So this is where I would get the backgrounds that you see, the images of the characters. So this is just an example of a prompt that I use to generate a picture of the PRMC boardroom. It does take a little bit of trial and error to get artwork that you like, but I found a lot of times it helped to create this richness of the world that they were living in. So, all right, those are the tools that we use, and I'm going to hand it back over to Becky to talk a little bit about some of our assignments.
Okay, thanks, Jason. So hopefully you have a good sense as to some of the fun we were having behind the scenes. The students did have to do assignments as part of the expectations for the course. So some of the things that we did to highlight the sim was the leadership style discussion that Jason described. So students were given the stakeholder bios and information, and then they characterized the leadership styles. ChatGPT generated feedback from PRMC's CEO, and that's what you heard. So that was really a nice start to the semester so they could get to know the characters. We often also have the students do voice responses back to the characters so that we can kind of get their interaction and get them more involved. We do have a strategic planning activity where they generated, we and ChatGPT generated a mission, vision, and value statement for PRMC, and then the students had to reimagine that and then also apply it into the food and nutrition and culinary department. And then our patient safety week, ChatGPT helped us brainstorm some safety scenarios that were also unfortunately brought from some of our past experiences. There were some patient safety scenarios that we could highlight from our prior work experiences. And we had the ChatGPT build those into scenarios, which the students then had to evaluate and then provide recommendations for action. We found in this week that the water cooler was a very popular place because the students wanted more details about what exactly happened and what the workflows were and how could they get more information about specific leaders or people that worked in that setting. And so what they had to do was come up with recommendations for action. And ChatGPT, again, helped us generate those responses from Jordan Kim, our Director of Quality Management. Next slide, please. We also had a human resources week, and what happened during our patient safety week was Kevin Bruce, our Director of Culinary and Nutrition, really had made some missteps and led to some significant patient safety issues that he did not deal with well. So during the Human Resources Week, we challenged the students to consider disciplinary action for this leader. And what was interesting is as they asked for more information about these situations in the water cooler, we had to reinforce some concepts about HR, such as the fact that we could not offer his HR file to them because of privacy and confidentiality principles. So there was some learning that we were able to continue to reinforce. ChatGPT generated responses from our Director of Human Resources, and the students, through a consensus activity, decided that they were going to fire the Director of Culinary and Nutrition. And then that led to us reinventing the way that the sim was going to move forward and some of the activities that were going to be happening in the next few weeks. And last, we have a quality improvement activity that really took a new light this year because we engaged it with the sim. So we, again, developed with ChatGPT's assistant some QI initiatives. So for example, we developed a project around improving rates of malnutrition diagnosing. We also had a project about enteral nutrition waste and how to improve that in the ICUs. And we used the Plan, Do, Study, Act model that they were learning in their didactic training. And in part one of this assignment, the students received the scenario, they received baseline data that we generated with ChatGPT's assistance, and they developed an implementation plan. They then submitted that to us. We reviewed it as a graded assignment, also fed that back into ChatGPT and generated new data based on their implementation plan that they did during the do part of their PDSA model. And in part 2, the students then got that new data. They developed kind of a review of how their plan was working, and they reinvented its, or they evaluated its success. So with the new data that we provided them, they were able to see if their plan was working or not. And in every case, we made sure that the plan wasn't working completely correctly. So the students then had to really think about how they were going to adapt it and develop some plan for sustainability. So that was a really, really successful project that came to light with the assistance of ChatGPT. Next slide. And then one of our favorite activities is our grant pitch assignment, and we did that last year as well as this year. The whole kind of point behind this assignment is that we expect that our doctoral students and master's students have exposure to grant applications. And we thought about how we could do that while engaging them within the sim. So what we decided to do was have all of our leaders have passion projects and areas that they would love to develop at PRMC, but because of the financial concerns and time concerns, they don't have the opportunity to do so. So by looking for grants to help fund some of these innovative projects, the students can help PRMC as they're in their consultant role. So the prompt was, the leaders at PRMC have hired the teams to move forward with expanding nutrition services. So we wanted this framed around nutrition that the medical service provides. And the hospital sees the value of growing services, but again, limited budget. So we asked the students to develop a 10-minute pitch to the hospital leaders to convince them to support the efforts in pursuing this grant funding. So they were really looking for a champion of their project. So first, the students reviewed the PRMC leader interest, and I'll show you a clip of that in a second. This was, again, ChatGPT generated. Can you go back one more time, Jason? And then they developed that pitch, and they were trying to convince the leaders. Then they presented those pitches live, and Jason actually set up a separate Zoom room with the PRMC conference room, so the students could see that the leaders were available and at their pitches listening. And then the leaders sent personal messages to the consultant teams at the end. And what made this really fun was that the leaders actually showed up and asked questions live. So I'll tell you about that in a second. So next slide, please. So let me show you first what they received before they developed their pitches. So they needed to learn about the passion projects of their leaders. So they listened to videos, and all of the leaders shared their ideas. So hold on one sec for this one. This is an example of Dr. Amir Shah, our chief medical officer. Okay, so that's what they got to reflect on, and there were pitches from all of the leaders about their ideas. And then the students developed their innovative projects, and in advance of our live session on Zoom, Jason took their presentations and put them into ChatGPT to generate questions from those stakeholders. So he actually was doing some pre-work, and he voiced some of the questions so that they would be available during the live session. So next slide, please.
Rebecca, it's amazing what you were able to do. I just want to remind you we have about 10 minutes left to the end.
Thank you. Okay, so our next slide here is going to be what happened when one of our leaders, Iris Fairweather, actually asked a question during the live session. And I am just letting you know that we do have permission from our class to show this clip. One of our students is highlighted in this small segment. So what you can see here is that the student is right in the sim. She's talking to the characters. She's engaging in trying to relate her project into the PRMC values. Next slide, please. So just to recap on our ICAP framework, we have felt strongly that while we have passive and active learning in this course, by we have to transfer content and knowledge to our students, we really did highlight teaching within the constructive and interactive phases through our simulation, using the water cooler, using our QI project and grant pitch and other initiatives that we've been doing. And we continue to come up with new ideas every week of what we want to see done. I think we would love to have this class be 2 semesters because we could keep our creative juices flowing. Next slide, please. And you may wonder, what do the students think? So these are our course evals from last year. We had 10 students respond, and 80% of the students strongly agreed that the sim enhanced their learning. We added some questions to our standard course eval, and they were very positive in their feedback, found it creative, inspirational. They loved the scenarios and working through them, very applicable, accelerated their learning and enhanced their knowledge. This semester, we did do a pre-survey where we were asking some perceptions and comfort with using AI. So we'll look forward to doing that at the end to see if there's some change. And we did have some students early on say, they're not really comfortable with AI. So we're hoping that changes throughout the course of the semester. We did make sure to reinforce when we would meet live with students that this was really us driving the AI. This is not them. So next slide. And last, faculty benefits. We saved a lot of time. We could have never done the types of teaching that we're doing without the help of ChatGPT. We also were able to give feedback to students in a really timely manner, and it was very positive for the most part. We would have to kind of beg ChatGPT to be a little more critical because it generally comes through pretty positively, but we're able to adjust and make sure that they're learning that feedback is important and it sometimes is critical. It filled in some skills. Jason has got skills in art and music, which he will deny, but actually at the end of the semester, he put together kind of something you'd see like at the end of a movie where you learn about where the characters end up, and it has a theme song, and I'm assuming we're going to recreate that this year, but just FYI, Kevin ended up in a correctional center because he was embezzling funds, so that was his trajectory throughout the narrative of the sim. Job satisfaction was really huge. As Jason said, I agree. It really had the most fun that I have had teaching in a long time, and low risk of error. Next slide.
All right. And I know I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I just wanted to briefly touch on this, that I think our sim is uniquely situated to overcome a lot of the challenges with AI in terms of data privacy, ethical concerns, accuracy and reliability of AI tools. Because the students were interacting with us and we were interacting with AI, we were sort of the intermediaries between the students and the AI. We were able to apply our own skill sets, our knowledge, and our discernment about how to protect students' data and privacy through this process. So I think that's one of the unique things about our simulation. And in terms of its accuracy and reliability, yes, AI can hallucinate. It sometimes can be confidently incorrect, but we often felt like the way we were using it to do a lot of more role playing, a lot more of conversational kind of dynamics and things, overcome some of that. And then our own ability to fact check and go over that data ourselves and apply our own expertise circumvented some of that. So I won't spend too much time on the rest of these. I do want to open up, so we have about 4 minutes left for questions. So I want to thank you all for your time. Again, this was such a fun experience for both of us. We had a blast teaching this course. I think AI can be a tool for good in the right hands and used in the right way. And I feel like we're doing that in our course. So we're happy to take any of your questions.
Well, I have a quick question. What are your plans for the future? Are you planning to do something similar with another course or expand what you have in this course? I'm very impressed. It's amazing. I think it's super helpful for students to have that kind of real experience. What's your plan?
Great question. Yeah. So we're certainly planning to expand on this as we go. Like every time we do this, it gets better and better. And of course, the technology gets better and better. So as AI tools get more expansive and more accurate and generate more interesting concepts, we're going to integrate those into our course. And we also have a few other things going on. So we're involved in a grant right now where students are actually using AI to practice counseling. So I've created a custom GPT where students can actually practice motivational interviewing, which is a type of counseling skills that healthcare providers use. And they can use the AI to practice those skills. So those are some other things that we're working on. I see some questions popping up in the chat too. So.
Yes, please respond. I can read if you want. So I would love to talk about expanding this concept. Okay, for another group wanting to take on something like this for their own courses, how would you recommend they get started?
Yes. So the great thing, I always say with any kind of new technology that you're incorporating into the classroom, start small. So you don't have to go as grand scale. One of the really big, I think, advantages was that we had a team teaching approach here. And I'm a kind of like big idea, throw everything at the wall, see what sticks kind of person. And Becky is a let's get down to the details. How do we work this out kind of person? And so we were a fantastic duo to do this together with. And so I think if you can find that kind of combination for people, it's really helpful. If you're just getting used to using AI, my biggest piece of advice is just go in and play with it. Until you go in and just fiddle around and see what it can do, I think that's the best way to get your hands on it.
There's a lot of resources too on prompt building and custom GPTs and that sort of thing. So feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to share resources. And I know in School of Health Professions, we're looking to try to develop some trainings in the near future through some committee work. So hopefully there'll be some good stuff coming. And time-wise, I mean, honestly, we're discussion oriented courses anyway, so we were already going to be doing discussions. I actually think ChatGPT probably saved some time and allowed us to be more expansive in them. On times when Jason was not available, I would do the audio recordings, but I usually wouldn't voice them over because I'm newer at these skills. So, but it would take me maybe 5 minutes to respond to a student. I mean, it really was very quick to be able to pull this together. With the water cooler, unexpectedly, the discussions became much more involved. So there were some times on a weekend where Jason and I were tag teaming and, responding to 6 responses and throwing little videos up. But again, it was just kind of all part of the fun of doing it.
That was wonderful. I hope there would be a lot of collaborative projects after this presentation. I think people excited based on the postings. All right, we have. All right. I think
Jason,
that
you want to hit that question from David? Maybe if we have one.
Yeah, no, and David, I think David already connected with me via chat. So please reach out because I do have some ideas. There are ways to get what you want with AI art, but you have to really get in and play with it. And I have a few different tools that I use to generate AI artwork, but sometimes it does not always give me what I want. But I've found different ways to manipulate it. So that can be one of the challenges sometimes is getting it to give you what you want. Yeah, happy to share tips and happy to connect with anybody who wants to connect with us about the work that we're doing here. Please reach out.
One more question here. When it comes to custom GPTs, is the information kept private? Is your source documentation proprietary? Will it be secure?
Yes. So I see a couple of questions too. So that is an excellent question. There is an opt-out setting in ChatGPT so that your data will not be used for training. Of course, that relies on how much you trust OpenAI to protect your data, right? But that is a setting that you can choose. I think we always tried to make sure that we weren't ever sharing anything that we didn't feel comfortable with it having. Our source documentation is proprietary. We do have a copy, like we put a copyright statement on it because we created this scenario, the characters, the town, all that stuff that lives in it. We did opt out of the training data, and we also tried never to share any personally identifying information with OpenAI or ChatGPT. I see another question about role-playing background. My role-playing background is I play a lot of role-playing games. So I've never actually participated in a Dungeons & Dragons group, but I'm very adjacent to that experience and play a lot of.
We meet every week. Every Wednesday we meet and we brainstorm. Like what's going on in the sim? Coming forward? What content are we teaching? How are we going to weave this in? And we just come up with ideas, and then we try to make them work. And I think most of the time they work pretty well. Sometimes, we've changed a few things from last semester, but we learn as we go.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm going to thank you so much for your engaging and amazing, interesting, valuable presentation. I hope people who did not get a chance to hear the answers will reach out to you. Please note the emails right now on the board. I will say goodbye because people are leaving to go to another session. But if anybody wants to stay and hang out, that's they're welcome to do that. Anyway, thank you so much, Rebecca and Jason. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. I can stay for a couple of minutes, and Jason, I don't know if you can, just to answer any final questions if anybody wants.
Yeah, absolutely. I say
thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Natalia. David, I see your question about using AI to simulate patients with musculoskeletal pain, such as low back pain, so that students can practice taking a history, providing education. Absolutely. Yes, you certainly could. You can take an existing simulation, simulate a patient and run that through ChatGPT to build the activity that you want. You would be surprised how quickly and efficiently you could create that activity.
Dave, we actually, as part of the AI and simulation committee that's developing, we're working on trying to put some training together in SHP, as well as we've been asking to see if we can get educational licenses for students, which would allow the use of ChatGPT and the ability to have ongoing conversations with a chatbot to be much more feasible for students. So cross fingers that we'll be able to get that moving forward in the next year or so. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the conference. And again, reach out if you need anything. We're happy to connect.